I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. It's like my life turned into some messed up soap opera overnight. I'd always believed that trust was the foundation of any relationship, something sacred. That was until I caught my wife, Lisa, with my brother, Mark, right in our bed. I remember walking into the bedroom that night and feeling a strange weight in my stomach. Something felt off, but I couldn't place it. The house was unusually quiet, and the only sounds were my footsteps and my heart pounding in my ears. I remember the faint smell of perfume mixed with sweat, and the way the bed looked, disheveled, sheets tangled and their clothes strewn across the floor. My stomach dropped. I knew deep down what I was about to see. When I pushed open the door, it was like time slowed down. They froze instantly, him with his face pressed into her neck, her eyes wide, trying to cover her mouth with her hand. I could see the sheen of sweat on Mark's forehead and Lisa's trembling fingers clutching the sheets. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell is going on here? I managed to rasp out, voice cracking. Mark stared at me like he'd seen a ghost, then quickly scrambled to pull on his shirt. Lisa just looked at me, her cheeks flushed with shame, but her eyes told a different story, something darker, more guilt-ridden. I can explain," Lisa whispered, voice trembling. "No, you don't get to explain," I said, feeling my hands tighten into fists. "You've been lying to me. All this time I was naive enough to think we had something real." Mark looked away, avoiding my gaze altogether. For a moment my mind went blank, just a swirl of shock, anger, and betrayal. I could feel my fists trembling, but I clenched them tighter. I needed to keep my composure. That moment changed everything. Suddenly the trust I had in her, in us, shattered like glass. I didn't want explanations. I just wanted her out of my life, but I had to see if there was more. I started going through her phone, her drawers, anything that could give me a clue. I found her messages, late-night texts and photos exchanged between her and Mark, things that made my stomach churn. But the worst part was feeling numb. I couldn't believe I was standing here feeling so stupid. I wondered how many times they'd done this behind my back, and if that was just the beginning of what I didn't know. I told her to leave. No goodbye, no pleading. Just a cold get out, and I watched her stumble out of the house, tears streaming down her face. Mark followed quietly, avoiding eye contact. I stayed there, staring at the mess on my bed, feeling like I'd just been hit by a train. In that moment, I started thinking about what comes next. You can't just lose someone you loved overnight, but you also can't let them destroy what little stability you had. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. All I knew was that trust was gone, and I'd have to figure out how to pick up the pieces. And that's where this story begins. I want to tell you what I did next, how I planned my revenge, what I learned, and how I finally managed to take control again. But for now, I'll leave it here. Just know, the worst betrayal is the one you never see coming. And once it hits you, everything changes. After she left that night, the house felt colder than it ever had before. Every corner seemed to whisper her name, every shadow reminded me of what I'd just seen. For a while, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling around what I'd discovered, trying to piece together how I missed the signs, how long they'd been doing this. I felt sick, like I'd been punched in the gut repeatedly. I started digging through my own memories, trying to find clues I'd missed. Small things, her phone calls that lasted too long, her sudden interest in working late, the way she'd sometimes get defensive when I asked questions. It all clicked now. Those little red flags I brushed off because I didn't want to believe the worst. But the real shock came when I decided to look at her phone, something I'd never done before. I hesitated, my palms slick with sweat, but then I thought, if I don't find proof now, I'll spend forever wondering. I unlocked it, and almost immediately there it was, messages between her and Mark, late at night, filled with flirtation and promises nobody makes unless they're hiding something. She'd been lying to me every step of the way. I felt rage bubbling up, but I also felt something colder, disappointment. How could she do this? Right before our wedding. I'd been planning to spend my life with her, giving her everything, and she was out there betraying me with my own brother. I took screenshots of the messages, saved everything. I knew I'd need proof when I finally confronted her again. I also started to think about my next move. I wasn't about to let her just walk away, not without paying a price. I needed to be smart, ruthless even, but I also had to keep my cool. That night I stayed awake plotting. I realized I'd have to outsmart her, make her regret she ever crossed that line. I started gathering things, evidence, yes, but also thinking about what I'd say when I finally faced her. I wanted to hit her where it hurt, but I also wanted to make sure she knew she'd lost everything. The morning after, I called my brother. I needed to hear his side of the story if he even had one. His voice was tight, defensive. He tried to deny everything, but I knew better. I told him I'd seen the messages, the photos. He mumbled something about it's not what it looks like, but I didn't buy it. I told him I was done with both of them, that they'd burned every bridge I'd ever had with them. I also started to think of ways to make sure they paid for what they did. I wasn't about to let this go quietly. I wanted to teach them a lesson, show everyone what betrayal looks like. I wasn't sure how yet, but I knew I'd figure it out. Something subtle, something that would hurt them more than I could say. That's when the idea started forming, something that would hit her where she'd least expect. I'd give her just enough rope to hang herself. I'd let her believe she got away, that I was too hurt, too broken to fight back. But I'd be waiting, planning, watching. And when the time was right, I'd make sure she knew exactly what she'd lost. The worst part, facing her again, knowing she'd lied to my face, knowing she'd betrayed me with my own flesh and blood. The thought made my stomach turn, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not without a fight. For now, I kept the evidence hidden, pretending everything was normal. Inside, I was seething. I could feel my jaw tighten whenever I thought about her face, her lies. I knew I had to be patient. I had to plan carefully, because once I acted, there was no going back. This was war, and I was ready to fight dirty if I had to. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those screenshots, but I knew then that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. No matter what it took, because trust, it's gone, but revenge, that's just beginning. The days that followed were a blur. I kept pretending everything was normal, but inside I was anything but. I'd replayed the scene in my head 100 times, her face, her trembling hands, Mark's guilty silence. Every time I thought about it, my stomach clenched tighter. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. All I could do was plan my next move, slowly and carefully. I started to notice things I hadn't before, small details that showed she was trying to cover her tracks. Missing phone calls, strange late-night messages, even a new lipstick shade left on the bathroom counter I didn't recognize. She was trying to act normal, but I knew better. I'd played this game before, and I was finally getting good at reading her. One thing was clear. I couldn't confront her directly just yet. I needed more proof, more leverage. I decided to dig into her social media accounts, her emails, anything that would give me an edge. While scrolling through her accounts, I discovered she'd been talking to Mark about what's next, how to hide everything, and making sure no one finds out. That was the confirmation I needed to understand how deep this went. But I also realized something else. I was angry. I wanted to punish her, make her suffer just as she'd made me suffer. Yet I knew I had to be patient. Revenge that's rushed or impulsive only leaves scars. Planned revenge leaves wounds that last longer. So I kept my cool, kept pretending I was fine, but secretly I was building my case. One afternoon, I got a call from an anonymous number. At first, I almost ignored it, but then I answered. "You're playing a dangerous game," a voice said. It was a man, calm but firm. "If you want to take her down, you're going to need to be smarter than her, trust me." I didn't say a word, just listened. "She's not stupid, she's smart. She's hiding things, but I can help you. Meet me tonight somewhere quiet." I hesitated. My mind raced. Who could this be? An enemy, an ally, or just some crazy person trying to mess with me? But I knew I couldn't ignore that kind of warning. I decided to meet him to see what he knew. That night I went to a secluded parking lot, nervously clutching my phone. A man leaned against a dark corner, his face partially hidden in shadow. "You're the guy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded. "I've been watching her and your brother. They think they're clever, but I've seen everything. You want to destroy her. I've got a plan." He handed me a small envelope. Inside were photos, more proof, texts, locations, her schedule. "She'll slip up if you play your cards right, but be careful. She's dangerous when cornered." I looked at the evidence, then back at him. "And what's your angle? Why help me?" He smirked. "Let's just say I don't like cheaters, and I think you deserve to make her pay." I left that meeting feeling both relieved and wary. I had the proof I needed and a new plan forming in my head. I knew exactly what I had to do. I'd make her believe she was untouchable, then strike when she least expected it. The next day I started to set my trap. I kept her under surveillance, checking her movements, waiting for her to slip up. I planted a simple device in her car, something that would give me updates on her location without her suspecting a thing. I also arranged for a coincidental meeting with her at a coffee shop where I'd be waiting. I watched her arrive, nervous but composed. She ordered her usual, sat down, and pulled out her phone. I kept a safe distance, hidden behind a corner, heart pounding. She wasn't aware of me watching her, and I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and disgust. When she finally looked up, her eyes darted around quickly, trying to spot me. I kept my face neutral, then nodded slightly. I was ready. I'd let her believe she was in control while I prepared my final move. That's when I realized I had everything I needed. The pieces were in place. I just had to wait for the right moment, and then I'd be the one in control. The betrayal was out in the open now, but I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I knew that once I executed my plan, there'd be no turning back. But I also knew this was my chance to finally take that power back. And I was going to make sure she understood once and for all that trust, like everything else, was just a game she'd lost. Waiting was the hardest part. I kept myself busy, but every minute felt like an hour. I watched her from afar, the way her fingers tapped on her phone, the way her eyes darted around nervously. She was tense, clearly knowing I was out there, unseen but present. I felt a strange satisfaction, like I'd finally turned the tables. I had her monitored through the device I planted in her car, so I knew exactly where she was every second. When she left the coffee shop, I followed from a distance, my pulse pounding in my ears. Every step she took, every turn she made felt like a victory and a warning. I was playing this smart, slow, calculated. No rash moves, no mistakes. She headed toward a shopping mall, a place she liked to go when she needed to clear her head. I stayed a few steps behind, blending into the crowd, watching her go inside. My heart hammered in my chest. That's when I knew it was showtime. I made my way to a nearby cafe, ordered a coffee, and sat across the street, pretending to be just another customer. It was the moment I'd been waiting for. I pulled out my phone, ready to hit send on the last part of my plan. My plan was simple but brutal. I would confront her with everything I'd uncovered, proof that she'd lied, cheated, and betrayed me. But I wouldn't do it face to face just yet. Instead, I'd send her a message to make her sweat, to make her feel vulnerable. I typed out a message, carefully crafted to cut deep without revealing too much. You thought you'd get away with it, but I know everything. The lies, the cheating, the betrayal, you're finished. I attached the photos I'd collected, screenshots of her messages, the location she was at, everything. The moment I hit send, my stomach twisted. I watched her phone light up, her eyes scan the message, mouth dropping open. I saw her hand tremble, then clutch her phone tighter. She looked around, probably realizing she was caught, completely exposed. Her face went pale, then a flicker of anger crossed her features. She looked at her phone again, then back toward the street as if trying to find out where the message came from. I was just a few feet away, blending into the background, watching her panic. She finally stepped back into the mall and I followed at a distance. I kept my cool, but inside I felt a surge of power. I'd finally broken the dam and now her world was cracking. I knew she'd come home, furious and scared, and I'd be waiting. When she finally barged into her apartment, her face was a mask of fury and shame. I stood in the shadows, watching her pace and mutter to herself. She kept glancing at her phone like it was a ticking bomb. I wanted her to feel everything I'd felt, helpless, exposed, betrayed. Then she dialed Mark. I overheard her say, "Did you see the message? How did he find out? What did you do?" Her voice cracked, trembling with anger and fear. Mark's voice was calm, trying to soothe her, but I could hear the fear in his tone too. I stepped out into the open. "Surprised?" I asked, voice cold but steady. She spun around, eyes wide with shock. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I'm just getting started," I said, and I could feel my jaw tighten. "You thought you could hide this forever, but I found out everything." Her face twisted in anger, but it was hollow, like she knew she'd lost. I saw her try to come up with an excuse, but I didn't want her to speak. I had everything I needed to make her regret everything, proof, her own words, her own betrayal laid bare. This was the moment I'd been planning for. The confrontation, the fallout, that's what mattered now, and I was ready to make sure she paid. The air in the apartment was thick with tension. I stood there, calm but furious, watching her desperately try to hold herself together. Her eyes darted from me to the phone in her hand like she was trying to think of some way to spin her way out of this mess. But I didn't want lies anymore. I wanted her to see the damage she'd done, to feel the weight of betrayal she'd buried me under. You thought you could just cheat, lie, and then smile like everything was okay, I said, voice low and steady. You thought I'd never find out. Well, guess what? I did. She clenched her fists, her face red with rage and shame. You don't get to play the victim, she spat. You're just as much to blame. If you were paying attention, you'd see how unhappy I was. You never made me feel loved. I scoffed, shaking my head slowly. You want to blame me for your own betrayal? No, I'm the victim here, and I've got the proof to show everyone what a liar you are. I pulled out my phone, already prepared, and showed her the messages, the photos, the location data. That's what I've been hiding, all your lies, all your secrets, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. She tried to reach for her phone, but I beat her to it. Don't bother, I said coldly. I already sent your boss, your friends, everyone I could think of. They're going to see the real you soon. Her eyes widened, panic creeping into her face. You're crazy, she hissed. This isn't fair. You're ruining everything. Ruin? No, I said. You already did that. I just gave you a chance to come clean, but you didn't. So now it's all out in the open. In that moment, I realized that confrontation was only part of the equation. I needed to make her see she'd lost everything, not just with words but with actions. She had to understand that her choices had consequences, and I was ready to enforce them. I paced around her apartment, thinking about my next move. I knew I had to cut her loose permanently. I couldn't keep pretending I was okay with what she did, not even for a second longer. I was done. Being the fool, the betrayal had cracked something inside me, and I was done trusting her. Pack your things, I said finally. You're leaving, and don't come back, not until you understand what you've lost. She stared at me, eyes filled with tears, voice trembling. You're serious? Dead serious, I replied, already reaching for the keys I'd hidden earlier. Here's your chance to walk away and save whatever dignity you have left, but I want the truth, no more lies, and I want you out of my life. She hesitated, then started gathering her clothes in frantic, trembling movements. The words on her lips were broken, but I didn't want to hear them. I just wanted her gone, to end this chapter forever. As she shoved her belongings into a bag, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anger. Relief that I was finally taking control, and anger that it had come to this. Once she left, I sat on the couch in silence. The apartment was eerily quiet, every sound amplified. I looked at the mess she'd left behind, clothes, makeup, the memories of what we'd once had. I could feel my hands trembling, but I clenched them into fists. I needed to be strong for myself. That night I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash off the feeling of betrayal. I kept replaying everything. The moment I saw her with Mark, the messages, the plan I'd executed. It was a lot to process, but deep down I knew I'd done the right thing. I also knew that trust, that fragile thing, was gone for good. Maybe I'd never be able to trust anyone that way again. Maybe I'd be wary, guarded for the rest of my life. But for now, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd taken back control, that I'd finally closed that chapter with a decisive act. And as I sat alone in the darkness, I realized something. Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes you have to cut even deeper to heal. The days that followed felt surreal. After she left, I was left with a strange emptiness, like the silence in the apartment was echoing louder than ever. I kept busy with the legal papers, the changing locks, the process of moving forward. Every action I took was deliberate, a way to reclaim some sense of control after losing so much. But underneath it all, there was a gnawing disquiet, the question of trust, of who I could really believe anymore. I spent hours staring at the door she'd exited through, feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The betrayal had cut deep, but at least now I knew the truth. There was no more hiding, no more lies. I'd seen everything, had everything I needed to move on. The damage was done, and I was finally in a position to rebuild. One thing I realized was that revenge, as satisfying as it was in the moment, was only part of the healing process. It gave me closure, sure, but it also forced me to confront my own pain. I trusted her, loved her, and she'd thrown it all away for a lie. It was raw, it was brutal, but it was necessary. I reflected on the whole ordeal, the red flags I'd ignored, the signs I'd dismissed. I'd been blind, yes, but that blindness had been comfort. Now that I'd seen everything clearly, I couldn't unsee it. And I didn't want to. I knew that I'd come out stronger, wiser, more guarded, but still standing. I also realized that I wasn't the only victim in this mess. My brother Mark was equally responsible. His betrayal cut just as deep, and I knew I'd have to distance myself from him for good. Trust was fragile, and once broken, it was almost impossible to repair. I wasn't ready to forgive, and honestly, I didn't think I'd ever want to. Looking back, I understood that the greatest lesson was about self-worth. I'd spent so long giving her the benefit of the doubt, thinking I was somehow responsible for her actions. But I was wrong. I deserved honesty, loyalty, respect, and I wasn't going to settle for less anymore. That realization was what finally gave me the strength to move on. I packed up the last of her things, handed over the keys, and walked out of that apartment for the last time. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of liberation. It was like a weight had been lifted, one I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. I looked at the empty street, the cold wind hitting my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I know it sounds cliché, but trust me, healing starts with acceptance and action. I couldn't undo what happened, but I could choose how I responded. I decided that I wouldn't let her betrayal define me. I'd learn from it, grow from it, and eventually I'd find someone who deserved my trust. Someone who wouldn't betray me like that. So here I am, telling my story because I want anyone reading to know betrayal hurts. It cuts deep and it shakes your foundation. But it also teaches you what you're truly worth. Don't be afraid to cut out those who don't deserve your trust. Don't let their lies and betrayal keep you down. Because, in the end, your happiness depends on how fiercely you protect your own heart. That's the lesson I take with me every day. Trust is fragile. Once shattered, it's almost impossible to piece back together. But sometimes, the best way to heal is to let go, cut loose, and move forward. And that's exactly what I did.